In a remote northern corner of the Kruger National Park, watched over by enormous 2,000-year-old baobab trees, lies an ancient walled African kingdom. It existed for over 400 years before being mysteriously abandoned. This is the site of THULAMELA.
And when you get there, these big baobabs, they welcome you. And you know what? I wish they can tell the story.
What excites me most from the THULAMELA point of view is the fact that we have this pre-colonial African kingdom that we actually know very little about.
It captures a whole area of our history and period of our history which we should all know about and which is quite fundamental to the making of South Africa.
For a long time, South Africa's documented history was European-based and considered to only really begin around 1652, when the Dutch sent Jan van Riebeck to colonize the Cape. But the discovery of sites like the remains of the great Iron Age kingdom of THULAMELA proved that African traders were importing and exporting goods across the Indian Ocean long before that. The discovery of this walled kingdom could literally turn South African history on its head. Between the 13th and 17th century, this hilltop site was a successful trading route, importing goods from as far away as India and even China.
So it makes us rethink South African history altogether. Instead of starting in the Cape and moving into the interior, we realize that there's a whole other history which is playing out in the interior, which is hugely important and often neglected.
Professor Peter Delius claims that the flourishing THULAMELA trade route is a key influence in establishing where South African history truly began.
In fact, when you look at THULAMELA, which goes back to the 1200s, it's an example of a period of history which long precedes the history of white settlement. So it helps us rethink South African history in a very fundamental way.
In 1983, a park ranger on patrol discovered the THULAMELA site in the remote Pafuri region in the northern tip of the Kruger Park.
The climb up the hill is in the saddle of this fairly impressive kopje that's in the area. You move your way slowly through the rocks, heading towards a very large baobab that sits kind of more or less in the middle of the saddle.
Archaeologist Dr. Tim Forsman has been astounded by the THULAMELA site. For starters, the breathtaking view from the top of the hill, where the Luvuvu River joins the mighty Limpopo.
From that baobab, you turn to your right, and you kind of follow this trail of baobabs all the way up through until you eventually arise onto the top of this hill.
The kingdom's capital was strategically placed on a small hilltop. A stone citadel was built, and it's estimated that at least 1,000 people lived on the hill, and another 1,000 on the floodplain below.
You can make sure that any trader has to stop and to pay their respects, probably in trade goods.
This area is a unique place because it has got 75% biodiversity of the Kruger National Park. 75% of the things that you see in the park, you can only see them here. Kruger Park is 2 million hectares, which is about 20,000 square meters. So this area only forms 1% of the park.
Godfrey Beloy lives and works in the Pafuri region. His family have lived here for over 2 centuries.
Apart from that, amazing history. The history of the THULAMELA people, the Iron Age history, and the history of the Makuleke people. So that makes it so special.
Historians have tried to understand the mystery of the rise of THULAMELA. They've hypothesized that after the collapse of Great Zimbabwe in the 15th century, the residents headed south and crossed the Limpopo to create this thriving kingdom. The significance of THULAMELA's great trading nation has been authentically reconstructed to reveal a glimpse into our past.
Although you might not realize it at first, you're looking up to the king's palace. This is where the king would have resided with his wives, and as you round that, you find these different partitions that have been walled off, some of them being residential areas, some being activity areas.
You can see there's a clear distinction between a kind of ruling group who tend to live up on the hill, which gives us an indication that there's centralized state power, that there's differentiation in the society, and that down below, living on the floodplain and around the river, would have been most of the population.
The lush floodplains of the Levuvu and Limpopo rivers were the perfect fertile farmlands for these new settlers.
It's literally at the best part of this landscape to cultivate crops, to have your cattle be able to graze and to control trade, to use these corridors to the coastline and then protect yourself, because those hills are almost impenetrable. They're very difficult to walk through.
People here used to be very, very good in agriculture. They used to plow crops, mealies. That was their daily life. And some of them were very, very good in fishing and all those kind of things. So that was life, you know.
From THULAMELA, the Limpopo River runs directly to the East African coast, where it empties into the Indian Ocean. This enabled trade with both Arabic and Portuguese merchants.
That Limpopo River provides you with access to the coast. It becomes a kind of highway, in a sense, moving any goods into the interior, and through that region, this river was a corridor.
It also links to an Indian Ocean trading system via the East African coast, which spans the Middle East, India, China, Indonesia. They were trading primarily with the East African ports. So there's Shibawene, which is close to modern Vilanculos, and then later on Sofala, which is close to what is now modern Beira, are the crucial trade links. The global world didn't connect to South Africa at the Cape. The global world connected to South Africa through the coast into the interior.
In addition to trade, there's evidence that THULAMELA was also a crucial production site. Skilled workers were extracting iron ore from nearby mines and converting it into iron to trade.
People were working with ivory, they were working with copper, they were working with gold, they were sewing, they were making cotton cloth. So it was like a huge production center, which is not often the way we think about African kingdoms. But we know huge volumes of cotton were coming in from India and elsewhere. But what we also see at THULAMELA is that cotton plants were imported. So you've got exotic cotton plants which are not indigenous.
At the site, clay spindles show evidence of a flourishing cotton industry. There are pieces of pottery and earthenware from cooking pots. Glass and ostrich egg trading beads are still scattered on the ground today, revealing a busy local community.
Glass beads were never produced locally, and we can tell that when we do mineralogical studies of the glass itself.
They've got a fascinating range of colors. We know where they're made, we know where the glass is made, we know where the beads are smelted, we know where they're coming from. We know they're not, in the main, being made in Africa.
As well as the import business, the export industry to Muslim and Asian traders was flourishing. Sadly, the big sales were in rhino horn, leopard skins, turtle shells, and of course, ivory.
The trading system was dominated by the export of ivory initially. It was inexhaustible. People would get as much ivory as they could take. And African ivory was particularly sought after because it was particularly good to work with, to carve, to turn into ornaments.
They'll bring pottery, they'll bring beads, and they'll bring it here and exchange that with ivory. In 1770, more than 85,000 tons of ivory were taken away from this area. That is equivalent of 2,000 elephants that were killed.
Today, the Pafuri area is abundant with game. This is a true testament to the commitment of the Kruger National Park and the work of the local community who've put a huge effort into protecting it.
What we are doing here at Pafuri means a lot to the future generations. The Makuleke people are the first people to claim the land in the Kruger National Park. And that is history. That alone is history. And we make sure that we do the right thing in terms of looking after the environment so that this area can sustain for the future.
Community leaders, historians and archaeologists worked together to uncover more mysteries of THULAMELA. Excavations carried out in the 90s revealed 2 burial sites on top of the hill. And so another mystery needed solving. As it appeared, they died over a century apart. Community leaders allowed the graves to be exhumed and reveal their secrets. King Ingwe, or leopard, was found in one grave. In the other, located in the wives' living area, the remains of a woman of noble birth were discovered.
The male burial was dated to about 1480, somewhere around there.
The king didn't die there. He died somewhere else, and they carried the bones. And the reason why they say that is because the bones were not intact like a human skeleton. You know, they were put together like a pie. And the reason why they carried him was that they believe that wherever they go, they will be protected.
So there's a 120 or so year gap between these 2 individuals. The female appears as if she possibly died in the settlement and was buried there.
The female figure was around 50 years old when she died. She was buried on her side in the losha position, with hands placed under the left side of her face. This, along with the gold items in her grave, is a sign of respect and nobility.
We can see in the burial of the woman that she's buried alongside a whole range of high-value goods. She's wearing gold, she's wearing necklaces, and she's got gold beads with her.
So why did the residents of this flourishing hilltop site leave their home? Theories range from traditions following the death of a ruler to an environmental disaster or a war over the control of land and resources.
Part of the mystery of THULAMELA is that we don't know how it came to an end, why that site was abandoned, and that's part of what we hope to find out.
And so it's really at the cusp of colonialism that THULAMELA was at its peak. So this is another big mystery, is how did that change the THULAMELA kingdom? How did it influence its trajectory? Did it result in its decline? Did it aid in it becoming more politically strong over a certain period? We don't know.
This is a period of great turbulence in central Southern African history. It's a period after the decline of Great Zimbabwe. The Great Zimbabwe site is abandoned in around about 1500. We know that new states are emerging in the interior.
I think what are the mysteries is an interesting way to think about it, because there's so many little lines that we can go down. Where did THULAMELA really come from? Why at the opening of the Levubu River on this hill did all of a sudden this amazing and incredible capital and kingdom appear? And over what period did it appear?
So with appropriate research and attention, we can hopefully give a much clearer understanding of both why THULAMELA became abandoned, and much earlier, how it emerged in the first place.
These questions are still unanswered. So much of THULAMELA's history disappeared when it was abandoned, but the ongoing mystery is very much alive.
Yes, it has got a very special place in my heart. We were able to claim the land back. But instead of coming back here and do some other projects, we decided to keep it for conservation so that people from all over the world can come and enjoy this place. And then for that reason, it is a special place, not only for me, but for the rest of the Makuleke people. We all love this place.